All right, peace and black power family. I want to welcome everybody to another NCRBG Productions. We have another great topic and a nice show that's lined up for the family today. The name of the show today is Where Do We Go From Here? Basically, we're going to talk about some tangible things that we can enact and bring to the light, start doing things better to uplift our community, and take this movement to the next stage. So with that being said, she go. I want to welcome everybody to the show, and what I'm gonna do is Mike, go get your baba. I'm gonna open up the mic so everybody else can introduce themselves. Okay, so go get it. The first book. All right, the first book I'm going to introduce to the family is Sarah. Okay, go get it. Go get it so we can go. Go get it so we can get ready to go. All right, the first book I'm going to introduce to the family is Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust. This is a book that was written by John Henry Clark, a great ancestor that has transitioned. He wrote a book, Christopher Columbus and the African Holocaust, Slavery and the Rise of European Capitalism by John Henry Clark. It was forwarded by Linwood Jeffries, and the preface was by Edward Scobie. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to read a quick passage out of this real fast. It's kind of like going to go with the subject of where do we go from here. Now, this is chapter 2 of the book, and on the first chapter 2, and it says right here, I'm gonna just read this and I'm gonna keep it moving. When I generally divide African history into 3 arbitrary categories. There is nothing scientific about my method. It is utility developed in order to simplify an overall approach to African history. In dividing African history into ages of grandeur that I call the first, second, and third golden age, I am saying to students that most people in the world who have had an age of grandeur or a golden age have had only one. As did the Romans, the Greeks rose and fell and never rose again. I maintain that African people have had 3 golden ages and could have a 4th one. What does this say about our potential and our ability to bounce back from defeat and decline and be a total people again? So basically, in what Dr. Henry Clark is talking about on chapter 2 is how Africa had failed. We had 3 golden ages. The first golden age was up until the 5th dynasty, and things when we had internal strife, people were able to come in and invade us and ended the first golden age. Then we had a second golden age. Then we had internal strife again where we was infighting. Then outsiders was able to come in and take power. Eventually we kicked them out, and then we had a third golden age. But basically, every time that we have had internal fighting within us, when we haven't been united as a people, outside people have been able to come in and gain power and remove us from power and kick us and take control of our resources and our land. So that's one passage I wanted to read. And another book is The Destruction of the Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams. Again, the name of this book is The Destruction of the Black Civilization by Chancellor Williams. Chancellor Williams, everybody should get this book. This is a good book. It's very in-depth and detailed, and it talks about how the Black civilization was destructed. But it also shows, when you read the book, how we was able, in the midst of turmoil and chaos, we were able to regain power and build powerful kingdoms after Africa had been raided and privileged by invading forces. So what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna read, basically, after Egypt fell, most of the descendants, they migrated west to West Africa. And when they migrated to West Africa, they started 3 great civilizations. And I'm gonna read out the book the name of the 3 civilizations that they started and what programs they implemented or what they was teaching that allowed them to be successful empires, right? So one of the empires was Ghana, Songhai, and Mali. These was the 3 great empires that the people that descended from the Nile Valley moved west, and they built these empires. And I'm gonna read how they built these great empires, and it kind of goes into where do we go from here and some things that we need to apply into our everyday lives so we can regain power and build our great empire, right? So right here it says, Songhai greatness was due to something more than the remarkable expansion of its empire over a territory larger than the continent of Europe. That was great, but greater by far was the grand scale on which the revival of learning spread among the blacks of West Africa. So what did it say? That was great, meaning the remarkable expansion of the empire, but greater by far was the grand scale on which the revival of learning spread among the blacks of West Africa. It's dealing with learning. So right now, I'm gonna read about the universities and the programs that the universities taught, right? The university structure consisted of 1, facility of law, 2, medicine and surgery, 3, letters, 4, grammar, 5, geographic, and 6, art. Here, art had to do with such practical training as manufacturing, building, and other allied crafts. After the basic training, the expertise required was through the traditional apprenticeship system and the various craft guides. So basically, what I was reading this passage is talking about is that after the great empires fell, when the people migrated from the Nile Valley to West Africa, they were able to build other great civilizations after they had been enslaved, or after their glory days had been gone and they have lost their home. They was able to migrate. But what they took with them was education, knowledge, and learning. And once they got this education and they applied the teaching and the knowledge and the learning, they was able to rebuild great empires through vigorous studying and education. So what I'm saying all this to say this is that just like African Americans here in America, we have been removed from our original home. You know, we have been enslaved and we have been traumatized. But through knowledge, through education, and through applying our traditional arts and crafts, we will be able to rebuild, or like Dr. John Henry Clark said, we will be able to have another golden age. Because the golden age, it all based off of knowledge. That's what made Mali, Songhai, Timbuktu, and Ghana great places in Africa. It was because of their educational schools, their educational systems. that they was practicing and the things that they were teaching and applying and building, and that's what made them great and powerful empires. So with that being said, I'm gonna leave the book section alone. And I just wanted to bring that up to talk about you know, some things that we can apply to STEM: science, technology, engineering, and mathematics. These are areas that we have always excelled in as African American people, and now we need to, you know, take that fight and take that challenge again to get back into these areas and start doing good things, you know, because that's what's needed to, you know, to regain our golden age, as Dr. Henry Clark said. So with that being said, I'm gonna open up the mic for anybody to say anything. We got Tony Riddick. He's gonna come on the show. He's gonna be the guest. He's gonna give us a presentation today. But right now I'm just trying to hold it down till he get here. Do anybody got anything to say? All right, don't. So what I'm gonna do is then I got some I want to show. I don't hear nothing. Is there anybody? Hello?
Yeah, I'm here, brother.
You want to add anything on to the bill?
Hey, now I just want to say I'm glad to be here tonight. I'm just gonna sit here, take some notes, and you know, go into the lesson, man. I think Brother Tony gonna bring something powerful, so I got my notepad. I'm ready.
We appreciate that. That's all I'm trying to do. I'm just trying to talk without really saying something till you get here. You know, that's what I'm really trying to do. You know, we all got ideas and things that we feel like that we can, you know, to help us get out of this financial that we're in right now. You know, because we're basically we're dead when it comes to financial literacy.
Yeah, well, I want to add some stuff real quick before you come in, and it boils down a little bit deeper than just finances, but at the end of the day, you know, man, I don't know how, and this show is the title to this show is perfect because, you know, where do we go from here? But the thing is that we don't trust each other enough. We don't desire to build as one because it don't take much, especially when the strength is in numbers. So if you just thought about, you know, I mean, like I said a couple shows ago, even like the home, everybody has something to offer, you know what I'm saying? But the system of those who, because I can't fault a certain group of people who put things in place so they will stay dominant. I fault them when it comes to, you know, hatred type stuff. But if you look at it, man, we're fighting as a people to gain our own dominance, not over nobody else, but over ourselves. So just to even start doing that, I think that we have to get to a place to where we really trust. When I say trust each other, want to trust each other first, because trust is earned. Okay, not just because you're black, that means I'm gonna trust you. But at the end of the day, you know, trust is earned. So we have to first want to trust our brother and sister to the right or left of us. We have to desire to want to help them with no reward in our mind, like straight from the heart. Because if we help one and that person is almost inclined to turn around and do the same thing for us. Some won't, but that's okay. Most will. You understand what I'm saying? So before we can even get the finances together on a larger scale, now individually, yeah, absolutely, we need to go ahead on and knock out some key things that's gonna, you know, help us grow as an individual, but as a group, man, it's some soul searching that we have to do. Let's just look at support. All right, so when y'all have an event, or we have an event here, we got to look at support. It's hard to get people just to support what you have going on, let alone contribute time, effort, resources, money. That's that. So, man, it hurts me because I see both worlds, right? I see the world to where some people who I used to associate myself with are cutthroat type individuals. They'll do a lot of things to keep their brother or sister from growing, and they'll do a lot of things to prevent from helping their brother and sister grow. But then again, on the flip side, and a lot of individuals who I've had the privilege of meeting in the last 5 to 10 years, I see a beautiful world to where I was like, wow, I didn't know it was as many of us that truly want to see our brothers and sisters blossom without anything, any reward for them. And once I seen that, man, that's when I came to realization of a dude told me this like 2 weeks ago, and it made so much sense. He said, when you leave this earth, man, you have to leave this earth empty. That I would never ever lose that again in my whole life. Like that's going with me to the grave. You have to leave. You can't. It's, for one, we already know the old saying, you can't take none of this with you. Got that. But more than material things, you have to leave this earth empty. You have to leave this earth empty with love. Like, you shouldn't have, you know what I'm saying? You should leave this earth with all your love almost expended, man. You know what I'm saying? If you loving every day, every minute, every second, your people. And not just your people, period. You know what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, this is not a hate thing. Self-love is not hate. But now, self-hate ain't love either. I'll leave it like that.
Yeah, I agree with you because, a lot of times when in history, a lot of the ancestors always talked about how you can become a living ancestor or your deeds living on when your body decays. So it's like when you're gone, or some people say you don't want to mess up the family name because our name is all we have, right? So a lot of times when you pass on, you go to the next realm, the thing that is left is your name. It's your name and your deeds, what you have done and what you have left as your legacy, or what's the stamp that you left on the world when you were here. So when I have left this, went to another stage, when somebody think of Stuart Fields, what are they going to think when they hear my name? Are they going to think that I was a person for the people? Are they going to think that I was a righteous person who tried to do? That's some of the things leave here. Material things as far as, wealth and stuff, you can't take that with you. But what you can leave, you can leave a mark as far as when people think of you, or also sometimes you can leave landmarks and you can leave a foundation or something that your people can build upon when you're no longer here. You know what I'm saying? Because at the end of the day, like, we are all born, we are all come here with a purpose. We all do. And I don't want to get too far into this, but when we come here, that's why when people have their zodiac signs, they get red, born, and the stars and stuff are aligned. Like, you have a purpose. That's our ultimate goal, is we have a purpose. We have to fulfill our purpose. Then we also have a name. And see, that's where we have been removed from our traditional way of life, because we went through rituals and systems wherein we were named according to the cosmos and according to the creator. So we knew our purpose was, but what our name was, and we had to live up to the qualities.
Hey, man.
And the attributes.
You preaching, brother.
Go ahead.
No, you preaching.
Yeah. We had to live up to the qualities and the attributes to that name. And we have been removed from it. So a lot of times, you know, by us having this bastardized language in which we speak and these names that we have gotten, a lot of times we have to go to our parents and we have to ask our parents, okay, will you name me this vision? What did you envision me being as, what did you, when you, even though you name me this name because we ain't speaking our traditional languages, but what did you envision me to be? And then you have to deal with your celestial body, meaning what is your purpose? What is you supposed to be doing? And then what your parents named you. So that's two different things. But when you deal with African spiritual systems, or not only African spiritual, I'm just saying, yeah, no, forget that. When you deal with African spiritual systems, it's certain rites and rituals that you go through, and you find these things out. You find your purpose. You know, a lot of people, we all have purposes. We all know this. And that's something that once you know you have done your purpose and you have fulfilled your destiny, then it don't matter about what you leave because you are right by the creator. You done with your job.
Hey, look, man.
We all out here seeking to find out what our true job is, what our true nature is, and what we're supposed to be doing.
Yeah,
you know. But look, I'm gonna do.
Is brother here?
Yeah, but he said he's gonna be a little bit late. But this is what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna go ahead. I was gonna save this 10-point plan.
One second before you do that. I want to say what you just said right there. If anybody out there listening, man, Brother Stewart just broke down something that's very, very critical. It's a hidden secret, actually. It's a hidden secret to where people don't understand. He said a word called purpose. All right. So the question that everybody under the sound of my voice, or who may see this later, are you living your purpose? Because when I hear people saying, hey, you know, man, it's Monday, I don't want to get up, it's hump day, oh my God. When I hear people talking like that, then that let me know that they may not. I won't say for sure, but it's a slim chance that they know their purpose and living in it. Because if they are, they can't sleep. They get up early. They stay up late. They doing key things that's gonna allow them to fulfill their purpose or come close to it. Or it's gonna do what Stuart said a while ago. They're gonna do key things till they leave here, and somebody else gonna pick up the baton and keep their purpose going. So that's all I have to say.
Okay, let me get everybody to mute their mic. I think Tony was here. So what we're gonna do is, let me see, because I'm hearing static. It's gone now. Okay. I thought I saw Brother Tony Riddick was here. I thought he was. Tony, can you hear me? I think I'm gonna have to mute my mic.
He was here.
Yeah, I don't know. I think he coming back, I guess.
Yeah, hold tight. Give me 35 seconds.
Okay, there you go.
35 seconds.
Yeah, we got the showstopper. One of the Titans about to come in here today. You know, I got my pen and paper. I came prepared. You know, so you know, gotta love the children. You know, that energy is flowing today. It's flowing rough out here. That's all, you know, I'm gonna say. You know, but it's all good. You know, we're gonna make it work. But you know, like you hit it on, man. We all gotta find our purpose, man. And hopefully some of the things that we are doing, we're in the process of, you know, fulfilling our purpose or either finding our purpose. We got the good brother sitting down. So I'm gonna pass the mic to Tony, and I'm gonna just sit down and learn. It's time to sit down and listen and learn.
Give me a second. Tony. Just give me a second. Let me get everything situated here. Let me get my chair right. Matter of fact, we just got finished a soccer tournament and we went undefeated. So I've been trying to hanging out with the kids a little bit. So just bear with me and we'll go ahead and get started in a second. I need about another 25 seconds. Let me take some inner breaths and get ready to get comfortable and talk to y'all a little bit here and make sure y'all can see my partner in the corner back there. And can everybody see me okay? Everybody all right?
Yeah, we got you. We can see you. We can hear you. Congratulations on
Yes, sir.
going undefeated, you know.
Oh, yes, sir, brother. Yes, sir. So, so basically, we're going to go ahead and get started. I'm not going to keep y'all. But thanks for the opportunity, brother. I really appreciate it. Can everybody see me and hear me okay? Okay, loud and clear?
Oh, yeah, you good, brother.
All right, let me turn my ringer off. We're going to go ahead and get to it. Y'all already opened up in prayer. Is that right?
No, actually, I was waiting, so you can go ahead if you want to.
No,
I asked somebody. But
if you could get somebody else to open up in prayer, and if you don't mind, and I'm going to go ahead and try to get this lighting right and get right to it. If you can, if not, I will.
Everybody, let's bow our heads and pray. Dear Heavenly Father, please bless this show tonight, Lord. Lord, give us the strength, the knowledge, and the wisdom, the understanding to understand what the brother Tony Riddick is about to bring to us, Lord. Lord, Heavenly Father, please give us the patience for his words will be clear and plain. Give us the insight to understand and to to get a grasp of where do we go from here. Lord, I ask all these things in your precious and holy name. Jesus, amen.
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 Peace, family. Peace, peace, peace. I give all honor and praise to God, the Most High, the Merciful, the Beneficent, and I thank God for this opportunity. Thank all of you for being online. And Brother Stewart, thanks again for inviting me out. I really appreciate it. My title today, based on conversation that Brother Stewart and I have been having, is where do we go from here? And we chose this title because oftentimes we talk and we don't necessarily bring forth the type of solutions that we may need. And oftentimes when we go and sit in on venues and lectures and seminars, many of the people that are speaking to us have not really did what they are talking about. So it's critical that we start applying experience in these settings so that we'll be able to become more productive with what we're receiving from the settings. So once again, the title is, where do we go from here? This is a question. It's a serious question that we have to ask ourselves. But in order for us to understand where we go from here, we got to understand where we've been and how we got here. Is that right? Once we go to understand where we've been, how we got here, and why we're here, then we can bring forth a solution in terms of where we need to go. So let's go back. I'm a spiritual man. Now, I say that not trying to debunk or take anything from anybody else. I rely on my spiritual intuition, my spiritual feeling, my ancestors, my connection with nature. Before I make decisions, I rely on that. And this is an old African system that our ancestors had in place thousands upon thousands of years before we were kidnapped and brought here as slaves. But what I want to do is I want to open up with a few scriptures. I have to do this because I want to build a backdrop so that we can get the proper understanding in terms of where we need to go. Because there's a saying, and I forgot who coined this phrase, that if you don't know where you've been, you won't know where you're going, and neither will you know how to get there. In understanding that, let's go back to the book of Genesis real quick. I want to take you to the book of Genesis, and I want you to go into Genesis chapter 15, starting around the 13th verse. And there in that scripture, Brother Al, it reads, "Know of a surety, Abraham, that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that's not their own. They shall serve them and be afflicted for 400 years. Then the scripture says after that, then I, God, shall judge that nation and bring them out with a great substance. Why is this so important? Because when we look at how we got here, those of us that are early generational, not the ones that came 50,000 years ago. I'm not talking about that diaspora of Africans that came. I'm talking about those that are direct descendants of slaves. I'm speaking directly to you, those that directly descended from slaves. This scripture was divine prophecy that our ancestors scribed and wrote about in ancient Africa. And these scriptures later became a part of the Bible. So in understanding that, it was written, predicted, prophesied, calculated, demonstrated that we would go into captivity for 400 years. So once we understand how we came to be where we are, now we can make better decisions on where we need to go, because we cannot figure out where we need to go if we don't understand the mechanism that got us here. And the mechanism that got us here was slavery. And so now, in order for us to fully understand where we need to go, we have to consider the effect that slavery has had upon our people for the past 400 years. Are you following me so far? Okay, good, good. I can see the nods. I can see the nods. Great, super. So now, what does all of that mean, Stuart? That means that when you look and understand what I just quoted from the scripture, it says that we would be afflicted. So now in 1619, when the slaves came here, we need to understand what the affliction was like. What does it mean to be afflicted? Huh? And once we understand what it means to be afflicted, then we can further bring forth some reasonable solutions to help us come up out of the affliction. Make no mistake about it, you're still being afflicted. Let's go a step further. I want to take you to 2 Kings. If you go to 2 Kings chapter 14, verse 24, it says, and he did that which was evil in the sight of the Lord. He departed not from all the sins of Jeroboam, the son of Nebat, who made Israel to sin. When we say Israel to sin, we're talking about the slaves. So here's what I'm saying to you. This condition that we're in, Stuart, in modern psychology, we call it learned behavior, because we learn to be this way. We learned not to trust one another. We learn not to do business with black people. We learn to hate those that look like us. We learn to disrespect those who have broad noses, thick lips, dark eyes, kinky hair. This is a learned behavior, is what I'm trying to tell you. Before we came here, we did not act like this. My lecture title today is Where Do We Go From Here? But I have to show you how you got here. And once we understand how we got here, we can recondition our mind to decide on what we need to do. So bear with me for a second here. Once you learn something, it becomes a part of your DNA. I want you to hear me good. If I say I learned mathematics, and once I start practicing mathematics, my DNA will conform to my state of mind. Paul writes that as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. Well, the psychologists and psychiatrists have caught up with the Bible, and they said this: if you reinforce ideas in children, those ideas will stay with them. So if we're taught, Stuart, that we're 3/5 of a human being, and we're repeatedly given this understanding, we will produce a subhuman offspring. I wish y'all would listen to me. We would produce a subhuman offspring, relegating us to animals, sheep, cattle, consistent with Article 1, Section 2 of the Constitution, deeming us 3/5 of a human being. Why is this so significant? Because remember, if you don't know where you were, don't know where you come from, you can't know where you're going. So we have to reevaluate this entire process. What am I trying to tell you is that once you think a certain way, your DNA transform to your thoughts. You can change your DNA based upon your thoughts. So when the slave master would beat black men, it caused the black man to produce a subservient, submissive form of manhood. And when he went into his woman to create offspring, the offspring would come out based upon that psychology. When our ancestors wanted to bring forth a certain type of individual in the past, they practiced something called genetic engineering. For example, if the Nile River was continuously overflowing, in order for you to properly handle the Nile River, you have to understand the laws of the water. You have to understand the laws of buoyancy. So in an attempt to understand this, they would put male and female together based upon their scientific understanding of water. They would later refer to these as gods of water. Then they would produce offspring that brought forth an understanding that was high as it related to water. Are y'all following what I'm saying? Okay, good. So now what I'm telling you is this. We have directly produced a generation of slaves. We've been producing slaves since we got here the second time in 1619. And as a result of producing slaves, our results are inconsistent with slavery. So in order for us to understand the solution, we have to identify the problem. Once we identify the symptoms, the problem will reveal itself. So now let's go a little bit further. Look at our names. My name wouldn't have been Tony Riddick. Your name wouldn't have been Al. Your name wouldn't have been Stewart. And those of you that have other names outside of African names, these names were given to you according to the book of Daniel, chapter 1, verse 7. Nebuchadnezzar changed the names of the Hebrew boys. This again is significant to you because you represent the Hebrew boys according to the scripture. So your names were changed. Why were your names changed? Because your name historically would have been tied to godly attributes. And they took those godly attributes from you because they did not want you to identify with God. The Africans named their children based upon godly attributes. And these godly attributes have been taken away from you. And so technically, you don't know who you are. And this is why your results are substandard. Because simply you do not know who you are. Book of Daniel, chapter 1, verse 7. Let's keep rolling. Look at this thing. Then they went further. I got to build the backdrop because we have to demonstrate what you're up against. We have to demonstrate where we came from so that we can properly understand where we're going. Why is this so significant? Let me just back off for a second. For those of you that say history doesn't make a difference, this is a lie. I can prove it scientifically. I can prove it historically. I have had the privilege of working for some of the top 100 companies in the world, international companies. I can tell you Before they move to the next phase of technology, they study the history of that technology. They cannot successfully move from the into another technology without studying the history of the technology that preceded it. I will tell you, anybody that's in business cannot be successful business-wise if they don't study the history of their business. No culture can be successful if they don't understand their history. And this is why Marcus Garvey taught this. And this is why Elijah Muhammad taught what he taught. And this is why John Henry Clark taught what he taught. Amos Wilson taught what they taught, because they understood the significance of history. And our ancient ancestors passed history down, both oral and written, because they understood the importance. They scribed it on pyramid walls. They etched it in stone, because history is our reality. Therefore, it's the truth. This is why they put it where they put it. Now, this other part I want to get into briefly is what happened to us. In the book of Exodus, chapter 1, verse 10, the Hebrew boys are starting to multiply. They're starting to grow. Pharaoh sends out a decree. He said, come on, let us deal wisely with them. Because if war break out and they continue to grow in number, they will outnumber us and come against us. Why is this important, Al? It's important because it's prophesying about events that are coming. Those events were that the founding fathers of this country, notice I didn't say our founding fathers, the founding fathers of this country put plans in place to usher in your and my destruction, your and my demise. Even in the text itself, it says, come on, let us deal wisely with them. That in and of itself, by law, is a conspiracy. So the founding fathers were conspiring against us from the very beginning. Then the book of Psalms, chapter 83, from the 2nd through the 4th verse, talks about a tumult being formed, so that the name of Israel will no longer be in our remembrance. We don't know anything about ancient Africa. We don't know anything about the Dogons. We don't know anything about Yoruba, the Igbo, and North Africa and Asia. We know hardly anything about these things, because a tumult was formed that caused these things to go away from us. And as a result of that, we are in the condition that we're in. Now let's back up. If we are put in a condition of slavery, that in and of itself is war. In military science, I spoke to a military psychologist in 2013, and men were coming from the war in Afghanistan. And he said, you know, Tony, when we interview these soldiers, we treat them. And he said, the best we can get them after 3 days of war is 80%. That means out of 100%, after 3 days of war, they can only bring you back to 80%. So I asked him a simple question. I said, well, what can you do for a man who's been in chattel slavery for 400 years? This was a white psychiatrist. He dropped his head and he said it's impossible to bring them back. Now, we as Africans, we don't believe in impossibilities, because we know that once God created the universe, he destroyed the impossible. But the point the gentleman was trying to make is that divine intervention has to occur in order for us to come out of the condition that we're in, because we have been sentenced to death as a result of slavery. Again, only 80%, right? If you've seen a war for 3 days, But if you've been in slavery for 400 years, he said it's impossible for you to come back. Why is this so important? Because now that we understood and understand where we came from and how we got to this condition, let's look at some historical data to show us how we're gonna come out of it. Any questions with what I've covered so far? Anybody got anything with what I've covered so far? Okay. Okay, good. So now let's look at it. Every time we've shown any evidence of growth, what you see in Exodus 1 and 10 increases. Come on, let us deal wisely with them. In other words, let's put programs in place that will cause their destruction. If you take Greenwood in Tulsa, Oklahoma, in 1921, that economy was booming. But one of the things that made it boom was that it was illegal for them to buy products outside of their community. Y'all ain't listening. It was illegal for them to buy products outside of their community. So as a result of that, they were forced to do business with people that look like them. And the reason why this is so important is because every nationality on the face of the earth identifies with their own except us. What that tells us that this is an unnatural psychological behavior that we're under. This is a negative inverse spell that has been placed upon us. It is unnatural for a cat to feed a dog before he feeds a cat. It's unnatural. But the only people that do this are the 40 million slaves in the United States of America. Why is this so important? Because it lets us know that we have been conditioned to be this way. Remember the scripture now in the book of 2 Kings, chapter 14, verse 24. We followed the sins of Jeroboam, who taught us to sin. Somebody taught us how to be this way. And this is why we're in the condition that we're in. But look at this thing for a second. What Rosewood taught us is that if you just leave the crabs alone, eventually they'll come up out of the bucket. But what is happening is that there is an overseer overseeing the crabs. And what we don't understand, Stuart, is every time a crab comes up, the overseer said, nigga, put him back in there. And one of the niggas will go and put him back in the bucket with the rest of the crabs. But what Rosewood, Tulsa, Oklahoma, taught us, Greenwood, Tulsa, Rosewood, Florida, taught us is if you leave the crabs alone, eventually they will climb out of that damn bucket. But our problem is that we're not left alone. And the reason why we're not left alone is because war has been declared against us and we don't understand the methodology. Now, look at this further. Look at Durham, North Carolina. In Durham, North Carolina was one of the most prominent business areas for blacks, period. There's a street called Pettigrew Street in Durham. I used to live in Durham. That separated the blacks from the whites based upon Pettigrew Street. Blacks had their own law offices. Blacks had their own grocery stores, their own doctor's office, their own schools, their own educational system, their own churches. But here is what happened. The overseer, the governor, the one that understands the nature of the crabs said, I know how to fix this. Let me integrate them. And once I integrate them, I will destroy their economic system. I will destroy those things psychologically that grips and keep them together. What do I mean? Stuart, take an old small community like a Husky. During integration, before integration, a Husky was strong. Even in Hereford, North Carolina, where I live, before integration, we had a thriving Black community. Most of the Black communities before integration were doing perfectly fine. So the first order of business for us had to be segregation. Y'all ain't listening. It has to be segregation economically in order for us to come out of the condition that we're in. How do I know this? You look at the Asians. They're segregated in the United States of America. You look at the Hispanics. They're segregated in the United States of America. You look at the Haitians. They're segregated in the United States of America. Mexicans live in Mexican neighborhoods. Asians live in Asian neighborhoods. Asian go to Asian businesses. Mexican go to Mexican businesses. Haitians go to Haitian businesses. Black people go to white businesses. The psychological disorder is too strong for us to break it alone. And this is why we continue to commit suicide every time we take $1 out of our community. And this thing can no longer continue to happen. Now, watch. In conjunction with that, look at how they devastated us with something called redlining. The banking system understood redlining. In the Black communities, what they would do is draw a circle on a map in red marker around the Black community. And they would say, do not allow any money to go in that Black community. This is what was happening. As a result of that, we couldn't borrow money to rehab our properties. We couldn't borrow money to keep our businesses strong. All of these things affected us. And then look at what he did in the 2000s. He did something called reverse redlining. And with reverse redlining, they said all subprime loans send it where the red marker is, which is the Black community. From 2006, according to the Boston Journal, from 2006 until 2010, Blacks lost $300 billion in wealth. From 2006 to 2010, according to the Boston Journal, Blacks lost $300 billion in wealth. War has been declared against us, and we don't understand it. And until we accept the fact that war has been waged, we can't properly find solutions to combat the war. We got to study how the war has been waged on us to know where we go from here. And then look at the evidence that has been associated and collected during the war, piece that evidence together to move us up out of the situation. This is what they do in the military. When they drop bombs in the military, they go back and study the bombs. They study the impact that the bombs have had that they drop so that they know how to build a better bomb. And we need to do the same thing. And the last thing I want to say, I could go on with this as it relates to this section, is don't forget the crack epidemic and the effect that crack cocaine has had on our families. Don't forget how it has destroyed Black women, not just by locking them up, but their sacred wounds, brother. They've been destroyed. So Black women are not capable right now of producing gods naturally because their womb has been attacked. That's another conversation, but I want you to know these things are happening with us so that we can better understand how to move forward. Pardon. Now, are y'all all right? All right, good, peace. Now, let's keep rolling with this thing, Stuart. So now, why is this significant? When we look at segregation versus integration, then we start to see our downfall. when we were segregated, we owned 100% of all the businesses in our community. Did you hear that? Stuart, that means the case that y'all were working on in Charlotte, if we were truly segregated, it wouldn't be a problem. Because the Koreans wouldn't be in our community. We would own the businesses in our own community. During segregation, we owned 100% of the businesses. We controlled 100% of the education. We controlled 100% of the politics. We controlled 100% of the banking. We distributed 100% of the jobs. We controlled the local police department. We controlled the jail system. We controlled the churches. So because we controlled all of this, we made the decisions to best impact and affect the people that we oversaw. But remember, all of those people that control the educational system, that control the politics, that control the economics, you would see them once a week. And where you think you see them at? In church. So all of the decisions, Al, came through the church system, meaning that every decision that was made, for the most part, was rooted spiritually, which takes us back to our ancient ancestors who were priests, where all the decisions were made by the priests. And so this system is a system that we need to tie back into, because we can say what we want to say about the church. It's the strongest, longest standing institution in our community. It is one of the wealthiest institutions in our community. But the problem with the church is that the church has been misguided. So in order for us to understand where we go from here, we need to understand that the church has to play a role. We need to understand that some sense of segregation has to be re-implemented. This is what it is. Some sense of it has to be regathered, and all of these things has to be dealt with through the church. Why is this important? 40 million blacks, 80% identify as Christians. That means that 32 million blacks are in the church. The largest percentage of black people that belong to any institution in our community is the church. Therefore, people like us that are online, we have to develop a relationship with the church in order for us to move our community out of the condition that it's in. Stuart, you take those three main churches in the Hosky, two main churches, Stackhouse or New Baptist, whatever it's called, and Soul Saving Station. Y'all control most of the black community right through that church, those two churches. If we develop a relationship with those two churches, which we're developing, we can transform our community practically overnight. This is why this election, Ahoskie will have his first black mayor, because we're developing relationships with the church to move the people to vote for the first black mayor so that our agenda can be at the table. But as long as we're saying don't mess with the church, as long as we're saying those Negroes don't know what they're talking about, we will never win the battle. We will never be able to take our people where they need to go, because the large percentage of the people in our communities are in the church. So relationships have to be gathered. And until we gather those relationships, we're going to have a very hard time getting where we need to be. So now how do we move forward? Now that we've seen all of this, we've discussed all of this, how do we move forward? The first order has to be in education. That has to be the first order. The first order has to be in education. But not just any education. It can't be any education. It has to be an African-centered education. An African-centered education based upon African spiritual systems. Because we know and understand that black people do better when they are influenced by spiritual systems. This is why one of the first things they did to us as slaves is attack our spiritual system, because that they know that we can be most powerful, most influential under a spiritual system. So this is one of the first things that we have to go back to, an African-centered education that's rooted in spirituality. If we don't do that, we will never achieve the things that we need to achieve. And within that African-centered education, every subject has to be founded in spirituality. So when we teach our kids mathematics, it has to be spiritually based. How do you teach a spiritually based mathematics system? You do spiritual exercises before entering the subject matter. When you do spiritual exercises before entering the subject matter, you expand and open up the mind of the child. Where do we see similar systems being practiced? When I go to Asia, every morning when the Asians get up, they practice something called Tai Chi. And the purpose of this is to get the bloods going, the adrenaline going, get all the cells moving within the body so that you can have a productive day, and so that you align yourself one with your body. We have to do the same thing through our educational systems, except we need to focus it more on the spiritual side of us before going into any form of education. That is primary, whether that be mathematics, whether that be history, whether that be economics, whatever it is, it has to be African-centered, and it has to be based in our own spiritual system. Otherwise, we can't achieve anything. The other thing that we need to do moving forward, once we recreate our educational system, our religious system has to be recreated as well. And by religion, the only thing that I mean, religion means a system of reliance. A system of reliance. That's all it is. And I am saying that our system of reliance has to be grounded in a spiritual system. Just as our educational system has to be grounded in a spiritual system, so does our system of reliance that we refer to as religion. And within that system of alliance, all of the gods, all of the angels, all of the disciples, all of the images have to be black. Every image that we see in this system has to be black. Otherwise, we'll never be able to achieve the desires that we're after. We have to reobtain our standing, our understanding of our God system. We have to understand that Africans saw themselves as gods. And in order for us to move forward, we have to reacquaint ourselves with this system. Otherwise, we'll never make it. We'll never make it otherwise. I'm almost finished. I need about 10 more minutes and I'll be finishing up. Now, the other thing that we have to look at, brothers, we have to look at our economic system. Even our economic system, again, first has to be spiritual. There can be no successful economic system without a successful spiritual system. Because if there's no successful spiritual system, your economic system will cause the lower classes within your community to become poorer and poorer and poorer, because there's no spiritual system instituted in the economic system. If you think I'm lying, look at the American capitalistic system. It's one of the worst systems in the world because it continues to create this gap between the rich and the poor. We cannot allow that to happen. We have to bring our community up together. And the way you do that is that you have to create an economic system that's rooted in spirituality. And if you don't do this, you will never be successful in the system of economics. Let's look at our economic system just briefly. Right now, we're grossing about $1.2, $1.3 trillion a year. This is what we're doing. If we were a nation, we'd be ranked about 11 or 12 right now. Somewhere between Spain and Mexico is where we'd be ranked. Our problem, Stuart, is not money, not in any facet. Our problem has never been money. Our problem wasn't money in the past. It's not money now. Our problem is disorganization. That's our problem. If we're ranked number 11 or 12, right? Then money is not our problem. Our problem is that the money is only staying in our community for 6 hours. That's our problem. The money is only staying in our community for 6 hours compared to Jews and Asians over 19 to 20 days. Whites about 17 days. The black community is only 6 hours. This is our problem. So we have to repatronize ourselves with the black community. We have to restructure, reorganize so that we understand that our dollars have to be spent with people that look just like us. Because even if we don't like the people that we're doing business with, at least their children will have a higher chance at going to a university because their parents can afford to send them there. But if we don't spend money with our people, we'll continue to produce the type of result that we're seeing day in and day out. Education is not our problem. About 35% of all blacks with bachelor's degrees work for the federal government. 35%. What that tells me is that the most educated people that we have in our community are not being entrepreneurs. They're going to take what you call safe jobs with the federal government, because 35% of people with bachelor's degrees that are black are working for the federal government. And this really is an issue because our people need to be more entrepreneur oriented. And if our system was rooted in spirituality, we would be producing more entrepreneurs. But we're not producing entrepreneurs because our systems are not rooted in spirituality, which makes it very complicated in order for us to accomplish these things. Now, although we're 13% of the population, we don't really control any of our wealth at all, Stuart. Stuart, check this out. Do you know that Asians today own more banks than black people do? Asians own more banks right now than black people actually own. And Asians are only about 5% of the population. And they own 40 banks. 40 banks. And they're only 5% of the population. So if you look at it on a percentile basis or on a per square basis, Asians more banks than we do. We make up 13% of the population, and we only own 41 banks. Asians make up 5% of the population, and they own 40 banks. This is a major problem. That means that Asians can better control the flow of their money because on a per capita basis, they own more banks than we own. That means that their chances of deciding which Korean can open up a Korean hair store is based upon the Asian person sitting behind the desk. We don't have that influence anymore. And the reason why we don't have that influence anymore, Stuart, is because we're disorganized as a people. Money is not our problem. Our problem is organization. So because we're highly disorganized and highly dysfunctional, we absolutely stand no chance of achieving the level of wealth that we need to achieve. Right now in America, out of all the firms in America, blacks own about 7%, roughly 7% of all the firms. We make up about 0.5% of all America's earnings, 0.5%. In the book Powernomics, written by Dr. Claude Anderson, Dr. Claude Anderson said in the 1800s, blacks owned 0.5% of 1% of all the land in the United States of America. Today, we own 0.5% of 1% of all the land in the United States of America. Why is this so significant? Because that means that 99.5% of the land in America is owned by somebody other than black. We only own that 0.5%. And we've been here for nearly 400 years. And we have nearly $1.3 trillion in wealth that we're bringing in every single year. What is wrong with us that we are unable to? So in order for us to move forward, in order for us to go to where we need to go from here, we must have an understanding of how we got here. And then we need to have an understanding of what's going on while we're here so that we can implement systems to best move us from the position that we're in. Let me take a break for a second. Sip on some of this juice. You all right, Stuart?
Yeah, I'm here. I hear you. I'm learning. I'm sitting back soaking it in. I'm just loving the information.
Yeah, beautiful, brother. And I'm gonna try to wrap up in about 5 or 6 minutes.
I mean, take your time, man. You know what I'm saying?
Good.
Look, it's flowing good. So take your time. You know what I'm saying? Take your time.
Oh, beautiful, beautiful. Yeah, brother. There ain't no problem. That's cool. So let's keep it moving. So right now, when we look at wealth based on businesses, Asians are kicking our butt, man. Right now, Asians are doing about $500 billion a year with their businesses alone. 500 billion. Right now, blacks are doing with the businesses now, with their businesses, about 135 billion, 140 billion with their businesses. The reason why Asians are doing so much better than us with businesses now is because, remember, they control the banking. So if an Asian goes to the bank to borrow money, that means an Asian more than likely is deciding it. If you go to the bank to borrow money, more than likely somebody that looked like you is not making that decision. This is very critical when it comes to building economics and wealth in a community, how the banking system plays a role in it. So what am I saying? In answering the question, where do we go from here? One of the things that we also have to pick up is banking. We have to control our banks because we see how successful the Asians are by controlling the banking system. Mexicans or Hispanics own about 15 banks in America. We see how successful they're being by controlling their banking systems. They control their banking system. The 40 banks that's controlled by blacks are governed by whites. They're governed by white executives. We don't have this issue with the Hispanics. In order for us to move from here, banking is critical. Education is critical. Churching is critical because the church is a viable institution when it comes to economics. We have the oldest institution in the country being the church, but there's no real productivity coming as a result of it. So in order for us to grab hold to these systems, we're going to have to move our people forward. Of course, naturally, politics is critical. The best example I can give you with that, look at Atlanta. We were in Atlanta recently. And while we were in Atlanta looking to bid on some of the contracts, one of the beautiful things I like about what they said in Atlanta is that 42% of the contracts have to go to African Americans. I found that very, very powerful, which caused me to become even more excited about being in Atlanta at the time that I was there. One of the things that we learned from Washington, D.C., from even watching Marion Barry. Marion Barry, before he became the mayor of the city of D.C., blacks only got about 3% of government contracts. Once Marion Barry got in office, blacks got 40% of government contracts coming through Washington, D.C. So Marion Barry was practically producing entrepreneurs overnight, millionaires overnight as a result of that. As a result of what we saw with Marion Barry, he was aiding in blacks becoming millionaires overnight in Georgetown and other parts of Washington because he made it much more likely for blacks to win those major million-dollar government contracts. One of the things I want to say regarding Powernomics and Claude Anderson books is that one of the reasons why we lost much of the land in the past is because the government's refusal to loan black farmers money. So they settled a case around 2010 for about $1.2 billion for black farmers who were denied loans by the Agriculture Department. The U.S. Department of Agriculture lost a discrimination lawsuit case because they would not loan money to black farmers, but they were loaning them to white farmers. So as a result of that, black farmers, when they got behind, they would have to go and borrow money from white farmers against their land. And when they had a bad crop year, they would lose their land, and the whites would wind up taking that land because the federal government refused to loan blacks money, but would loan white money. And this is why we lost so much land in the United States of America over the years. So where do we go from here? We have to reclaim land. That means that those of you that are in the north, those of you that are in the south, the west, wherever, we have to go and reclaim the land that our ancestors once had. One of the reasons I moved back to North Carolina was because my family was pretty land rich for a long time. And we started to lose a lot of that land. So we moved in positions, the younger generations within the family, so that we could reclaim most of the land and make sure that we were doing everything that we could to keep the land that was in the family that our ancestors worked so hard to achieve. And this is why in North Carolina and South Carolina and places like Georgia and things like that, blacks are reobtaining much of the land wealth that their ancestors used to have, because now land is becoming better than gold. And it has always been that way technically, but we have to refamiliarize ourselves with the process. The other thing that we must do, family, in order to move forward in answering the question, where do we go from here? We have to control our local politics. You will never be able to control the flow of money in your community without controlling the politics. And the reason why we see that is because when you look at it right now, blacks have very little input. I don't think there are any black senators right now. You might have about 40 blacks in the U.S. House or something like that, but there are no black senators now. We just got out of the era of a black president. Politics is important, but we don't have to play federal politics right now. Local politics is always first. Local politics is mostly important. And most politicians will tell you that politics start local. And so one of the things that we're looking to do in Ahoskie, joining up with NCRBGZ, is that we're going to get the first black mayor in the town of Ahoskie. The town that we live in, we recently got the first black mayor about 4 years ago. And we're going to get another black on city council. We have one now. We're going to get another black on city council this election. We're organizing right now to make those things happen. Because when you control the politics, undoubtedly you control the flow of money. Undoubtedly you control the education. Undoubtedly you control all economics that come into that community. But it's very important that we control the politics. So we're going to call ourselves conscious. If we're going to say that we are the ancient Africans that did all these things in the past, then we need to start controlling the politics within our own community in order to move us forward as a nation. What am I saying to you? What I'm saying to you is simple. In answering the question, where do we go from here? There's a lot of different things that we can look at. But right now, the most important things that we control is our education. We have to control our system of reliance that you call religion. And that system of reliance, along with our educational system, has to be based in spirituality. Our economic system has to also be based in spirituality, because you can have no successful nation without having a successful economic system, without having a successful political system, without having a successful educational system that's grounded in spirituality. It has to be grounded and rooted in spirituality. One of the reasons why the Africans were able to rule for so many dynasties, for so many thousands of years, is because they had an economic system. They had a social system. They had a political system that was grounded and founded in spirituality. And this is the thing that we have to get back to in order to make our community successful. And what I'm trying to encourage you to do right now in understanding where we go from here is that we have to take these three major pieces: education, economic, and the system of reliance that you call religion. We have to start with these three pieces and merge these three pieces in our day-to-day lives so that we can move our community forward. And please understand, you do not have to start on a federal level. You can start organizing like we're doing here on small level. You get a group of 5 who are like-minded, and get that group of 5 that's like-minded to start organizing the local politicians, developing relationship with the local churches. And once you develop relationship with the politician and the local churches, then you use those relationships to leverage economics in your community. Then once you leverage economics in your community, then you start looking to put your own banking system in your community that you control. And once you do that, you'll own your way to where you need to be in order to bring freedom, justice, reciprocity to our people. But the only way that you're going to do that is that you have to control these three major pieces that we're talking about. Now look at this. You look at what's happening in the world today with North Korea. You look at what's happening in Syria. When you think about North Korea, listen at it, North Korea. You know that in that region, Koreans are there. They share something called cultural congruency. Cultural congruency is something that we were deprived of. We came here, they separated all of us that had similar cultures, that had similar backgrounds, similar religions, similar dialect. They separated us, disarming us from our cultural congruency. When the Hispanics came here, they brought their culture. When the Asians, the Koreans came here, they brought their culture. The Japanese brought their culture. The Chinese brought their culture. So when you go into a Chinese community, you see Chinese writing all over the place. When I was in Oakland, living out in the Bay Area, when we would go into Oakland in the 80s, in the 70s, you wouldn't see Chinese writing on the signs. When you go to Oakland, California now, baby, there's Chinese writing on the signs because the Chinese are influencing the politics and the economics in Oakland. And Oakland was a black township thriving, being ran by black politicians and black business leaders. It's not like that anymore. When you look at a lot of the urban communities today, you see people other than black controlling our politics, people other than black controlling our economics, people other than black controlling our educational system. And this is why our people are not moving to the rate that they need to move, because the people that should be in control are no longer in control in those positions. Peace, brothers, you there?
Yeah, we here, we listening, loving it, loving it.
So I want to start wrapping up. And one of the things that we want to hit on is that what we have to get out of this and where we go from here. It's very important that we understand the history. We got that. It's very important that we develop an educational system. And it has to be an African-centered educational system. And African-centered educational systems are rooted, grounded, and founded in spirituality. There can be no successful economic system without a successful spiritual system. So an educational system that's grounded in spirituality, and by educational system, Stuart, it doesn't mean that you got to have a big school like we understand it. If your church is in your community, that church is a school. If you don't have a church, your backyard is a school. Your front room is a school. Your front porch is a school. We have to start taking advantages of these things in order for us to bring our people into the proper education that we need to bring our people to. And when you look at the Chinese, if they go to public schools, after school, they go to a Chinese after school program. One of the best examples of this, we see it in places like Williamsburg, New York. You look at how the Jews control the economics, the educational system, how they control the schools within their community. This is where we have to go back to. The Jews are segregated in the United States of America, as I said earlier. The Chinese segregated, Koreans segregated, Hispanics segregated. We're the only people practicing integration economics. Integration economics doesn't work because integration economics takes your money from out of your community. That's why the average dollar only stays in our community for 6 hours, because we're practicing integration economics. You can't do that, family. We have to get out of that. And once we start getting out of that, we'll start transforming our community. But please understand this in closing. It's very important that you use a system that's already in place. The church is already in place. We have to become very business savvy, very biblical savvy, go into the churches and move the momentum of the church in a direction that's most productive for the people. The church is waiting on good, strong leadership. And right now, the preachers are leading because our people are looking for leadership. But we need the right kind of leadership in the churches. And right now, we don't have it. So those of you that are conscious, use your savvy to integrate the churches. When I say integrate, I mean move the conscious community into the churches. And then once you infiltrate the churches, then you can move the momentum of the churches in an area that's productive for the masses of the people. I thank you very much for listening, family. Any questions? Any questions? Peace, family.
Appreciate everything you said, man. And just, appreciate it. And you hit it right on the head, man. You hit the nail right on the head.
Well, brothers,
Yeah,
I appreciate y'all tuning in.
Yeah, we appreciate it. And, it ain't no adding on. It's just we're gonna let you in the show. I'm gonna build with you once we get offline, though. I'm gonna let you in the show, Tony.
Well, good. I mean, we good, brother. I mean, may the blessings of God continue to rest upon y'all. And I think that when we get a chance, what we really need to do, Stuart, is all the brothers or everybody that's on the line, we need to sit down with them in a group and go ahead and start putting systems in place so that we can implement some of the things that we talked about tonight. It's not real complicated. We're already doing it in many areas, but we want to get brothers and start implementing small pieces at a time and make those small pieces develop into bigger pieces. So if you don't have any questions, then it will be next time.
All right. We thank everybody for showing. So peace and black power, family.
Peace, family.